Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, our guest is Ebba Karlsson. She's the founder of True Star Coaching. She's a certified law of attraction and creating money coach with 20 years of experience in meditation. She's also the author of True Starlight, From Living in the Shadows to Being Stellar. Ebba, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you, Ebba. And one of the things that you talk about in the book is coming out of the shadow, whether it is a literal shadow that's holding you back or a metaphorical shadow. Let's talk about the shadows and how you started to experience those shadows, starting from very early on. In the book, you write about being a young girl and really, really being broken by your parents, really.
hmm Yeah, I think, my dad worked in the music business. So he was a little bit like the back figure, being a sound engineer. So I always saw these famous artists in Sweden where I grew up. And, that also made me realize it wasn't so glamorous as, media could present it as. So I think living with that in that world was how I started realizing everything is not as it seems to be.
Hmm.
And also that led me to be with my mom, who was, also in the shadow of my dad. So I saw the impact it had on her life. And I didn't want to be like her. So I was a little bit of a rebel, and my childhood was somewhat chaotic because my dad was a little bit of a philanderer, I think you call it, when he was, flirting with women and having affairs outside of the marriage. And that had a huge impact on my mom. And she started drinking and became an alcoholic and was very violent towards me. So early on, I learned to close off my emotions and cut myself off from life, really. And that led into depression. So when I was 15, I think, or 14, I really didn't want to live. So I wanted to cut myself. I remember being young and wanting to revenge and, hurting myself. And in that moment, I looked up to the stars in the sky and connected to the universe in a way that I haven't done before. And then I realized that I loved life so much and I didn't want to hurt myself anymore. But that also started a long spiritual quest of who am I and why am I here?
Mm. And so growing up in that chaotic family, but still being very beautiful, how do you deal with being pretty and sort of people coming at you that maybe were not right intentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of people think it's easy to be pretty and that you have a lot for free being pretty, which I think, looking back, it's not, because you become identified with your shell or the
Mm.
body, which is not really who you are inside, right? So I think people wanted to use that energy or take something from me in that sense early on, and I was very innocent. I always believed people were good until the day that I was proven wrong and my innocence was kind of lost. So but honestly, I was not like, I'm an average Swedish person, I would say. I'm not particularly beautiful. Sweden has a lot of beautiful women and they're a lot taller than I am. But I guess I had that idea that I wanted to be, a model, because some people said that I could be. And so when I was older, I went to pursue that dream that led to some not so fun
Hmm.
experiences.
And so do you think that being that your dad was in the book you write, he was addicted to sex and your mother was addicted to alcohol, that your life sort of and your brother's life is just literally in your own hands, and you're sort of left to fend for yourselves.
I very much think so. Like, I became pretty street smart quickly and also very suspicious. Like, I I guess that I expected people to not be who they were. So that also saved me later on, I guess. But it's a wound that we need to heal, because we can't, well, if we don't heal it early on, we continue this habit of perceiving people in the same way as we did as children. So I think I just repeated the same thing over and over. I attracted people who would be similar to my father, who would cheat on me, and then also negative people around me that would use me. And I didn't understand then that that was my own creation.
Hmm.
I didn't understand that I could be free from that by doing my own shadow work.
Hmm.
So, but
And
that's
I
something I
I
learned later.
think those laws of attraction are really true, and you sort of write about it in the book. When you get a little bit older and you go to Paris, you're taken advantage of, but then you start to by a man, by an older man, but then you start to come into, at some point, the revelation of, why am I attracting this, and what do you find out about that?
Well, the pursuit of happiness, I started that early on. I Since I didn't feel like I got the love and attention from my parents, I started looking from, you know, on the outside, within, men outside of myself, and had lots of boyfriends. And when I was approached by a model scout in Stockholm, who wanted to take me to France to do a model job there, I was very much flattered, and I guess my ego was, I was vain, and I wanted to be the next Cindy Crawford, and I thought, this is my chance. So even though I had a job, I had a boyfriend, I wanted to take the opportunity to go there and try my wings. So I did, and I don't know if you want me to go into the story, but
Sure, sure. Let me take a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk about going to Paris and really looking for the dream of modeling, and how that journey ends up taking you on a different path. Our guest
mhm.
this morning is Ebba Karlsson. The book is True Starlight: From Living in the Shadows to Being Stellar. Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Ebba Karlsson. She's the founder of Star Coaching, and she's a certified law of attraction and creating money coach. And we're talking to her not only about coaching, but about her book, True Starlight: From Living in the Shadows to Being Stellar. And so before we went to break, Ebba, we were talking about that desire to want riches and fame and popularity and all that comes with being a model. And so you feel like you have an opportunity, and you decide very early to go to Paris and try to pursue this opportunity. But when you get there, it's not what it was billed as being. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, and this is so important, because obviously I'm not the only one who this has happened to. And it happens in so many areas of life, where, especially maybe in the artist industry, where we want to be something, right? We want to be famous, we want to be successful. And I thought I could be the next Cindy Crawford, or I thought there was a chance for me to be that. So I followed this scout. Actually, I had one-way ticket, and I got to France and Monaco. And when I got to Monaco, we didn't have cell phones back then. So we had to call from photo booths, and then there was no job for me. And it turned out this scout was very much interested in me as a person. And since there was no job for me, he promised me another job, and we had to travel to Cannes, which is a city on the Riviera of the coast of France. And there I was raped in a pool shack by him. And that was very scary, of course. And I think that's when I realized how stupid I was and vain. And I took it upon myself that I was, very stupid to go along with this guy. And I just needed to survive at that point. So I said to him, you promised me a job. What are you going to do about it? And then he said, yeah, we're going to go to Paris. And then we went to Paris. And
Are you still able to trust him at this point after he's lured you to Paris and he's
no,
essentially raped you and, you're there?
no.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was, I think just because I left, by myself, and I was very proud. I didn't want to tell my parents. I wanted to be able to deal with this problem myself. So I just said, I just got to go through with this. I needed a ticket to go back, first of all, and I needed that job. So I trusted that if we go to Paris and I go to an agency, it will be easier. So I wanted to give him the next, an opportunity to be able to fulfill what he had said.
Mm-hmm. But before that, you meet a lady that says, Ebba, if you need help, you meet a lady in the process of being with the man who takes advantage of you, and you meet a lady and she says, if you need me or if you need help,
Yes,
call me.
I thought I didn't need anybody's help. I thought I was old enough to deal with things myself. And looking back, I really regret not taking her phone number, and taking her advice, because
What was she saying to you, Ebba? Did she know that?
I don't think so. I think she was just a friend of his, and but maybe she knew intuitively what was going on. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish that I had listened to her, and or at least had some kind of security before I even left, that I could call somebody and give them a secret word or something,
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't okay. But I think what was my obstacle was that I felt ashamed, like I put myself in this situation. Now I need to take myself out of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you meet, or the gentleman that you go to Paris, that first of all, he's surprised that you even came. And then you start on this sort of journey with him. And then he introduces you to another man that says, okay, I'm looking for an assistant. What do you think then? And because you speak French, and he was like, yeah, I could use basically a secretary, really.
Yeah. That was really worrying to me, that there was no job. And I started thinking, was this just a game, or was this just a setup? I had no idea about trafficking. That was not a word that existed back then. This was 1990, and I wasn't young. I wasn't a child. I was 20. So I wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
completely innocent in that sense. But I think I really wanted to trust people, and I allowed them to guide me, and I looked up to them because they were, business people. They lived in Monaco, and when I got the first decline to that job, I just I'm not going to be a secretary. So
Mm-hmm.
what's next? That's when I pushed this agent to take me to Paris, and then we got there, and I stayed with another agency, or an owner of an agency first. And he also, because I was very fit, I was more like a fitness model, I guess. So I didn't fit into his criteria. He wanted more the slim and
Mm-hmm.
the, I don't know, Kate Moss kind of look, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I just, okay, well, where's the job you promised to the scout again? And that's when I got this opportunity to go see Elite and Gerald Marie.
Mm-hmm. And so at this point, are you just thinking, I'm going to make it, I'm not going to let my parents know? What are your parents saying about you traveling, across the country. And
Yeah, I think, back in the days, a lot of people traveled. We hopped on trains, we traveled to the south of Europe. It wasn't a big thing. I think my parents really trusted me. I had always been very independent and doing things on my own. So I guess they trusted my opinion. They didn't understand. They definitely didn't understand what was happening.
mhm. And so you're pursuing this dream of being a model, and you go through all of these challenges. And when do you decide, okay, maybe this is not what the universe has for me?
You know, I think it was when I came to that casting, and this Elite was the biggest model agency at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they produced all the supermodels. So to go there was it was huge for me. It was prestigious, and I had a lot of respect for this agency and then the owner. But when when he invited me to his office, and he actually raped me digitally with his fingers, that was like he took my power away. He chopped my head off, and I felt like that was serious. That was the worst thing that could have happened, because then I felt I need to survive. I need to get back. I need to get back home, and I started becoming really scared.
Mm-hmm. And he asked you a
So,
question. He said, how do you think all of these other girls have been successful? And what did you think when he asked you that question?
it was weird. The first, when I got into his office, he shut the blinds, and it was during the daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And then for like what felt like 1.5 hours, he was questioning me about what I wanted with my future, what I kind of like getting into my brain. And I was very much interested in medicine and holistic healing. So he was like, "Are you going to be a brain surgeon to
Mm-hmm.
earn six figures, or are you going to be like these beautiful girls?" And then he started showing me these famous people.
Mm-hmm.
And as he said, what do you think they did? I'm like, of course they worked hard. I could not think for 1 second that there was anything else going on.
Wow.
It was just, I could not. I mean,
You
to me,
couldn't
that
make the
was
leap of what he was really saying.
no, until he just did
He
the
put his
shoving of
hand,
his hand
right.
between my legs. And then I'm like, wow, like my whole dream just collapsed there.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that happened. And
Wow.
I thought I was the only one. I thought he liked me
Mm-hmm.
personally, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought he wanted me to be, his girlfriend or something. And I'm like, okay, let me think about this. That's how I reacted, because I thought I need to get out. I don't know how to get out. So I just played along. And then when I got out of there, I collapsed and I just cried. And I just thought to myself, I need to figure out how to get home.
Wow. Hold that thought. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll have more of Ebba's story after this. Stay on point. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about our plans versus the universe's plans, and how we can get caught up before we ever even know that we're caught up. Our guest this morning is Ebba Karlsson, and her book is entitled True Starlight: From Living in the Shadows to Being Stellar. And so those shadows take many forms. And one of the things that happened is you did get back home. And when you get back home, how do you process all of the abuse and misuse that you experienced on this journey just to try to live your dream?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I was shocked. I was abused. I was sexually abused. So I couldn't have an intimate relationship with my boyfriend. And I promised not to tell a single soul, because I was so ashamed. This was all my fault. I put myself in this situation. I could not see that it was not my fault at all. I didn't want to go to the police. I hid. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody. I even wrote in my diary that I just wanted to forget the whole thing. So I did. I really buried it deep. But as soon as my boyfriend at the time started touching me, I had to tell him because he thought, something was wrong. So he actually found this scout and punched him down,
Mm-hmm.
which I felt good about. But I was scared. I was so scared that this agency was going to come after me and chase me down, even though, I mean, I lived in another country. It wasn't until that BBC did this documentary in, I think it was 1996, that I realized that I wasn't alone. And the police did a raid also for drugs. And they, that's a whole other story, what happened to
Sure.
that documentary.
But you
But
realized that you were not alone and that this was
yes,
a common practice for young girls
yeah.
and young women.
But even though even that happened, I didn't want to go to the police.
Mm-hmm.
So I still thought that, okay, I realize I'm not alone, but I'm not wanting to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until much later when I started really working and putting myself under deep pressure that all these emotions came up to the surface, and I realized I had a lot of stress. I had cut off my emotions. I was very hard. I was ice cold. People were scared of me because I wasn't in touch with my pain, and I hadn't healed. So it took several years for me to actually realize I needed to work on myself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started my process. I burned out building a business. And that's when I went into therapy and started really deep work, subconscious work, emotional, spiritual, and mental work to
Mm-hmm.
heal.
When did you find out, Ebba, that we can attract certain people, certain situations into our lives just by who we are, how we show up?
hmm I think I always have been. We're always attracting, right? We're always attracting everything. When I realized I was attracting by default was later when I studied the law of attraction, and I did a training in Quantum Success Coaching Academy. But I think when I went through that training, I realized that I had been creating. I was not a victim. I had created everything, and that was so
That you
empowering.
had created it.
Yeah, I was co-creating everything and I realized that my soul actually had seeked out this incidents, this experience to grow. And when I realized that it was my choice all the way, it was so empowering because I could uncreate it. I could
Mm.
uncreate the pain and the suffering and turn that and use that into something very empowering.
Mm-hmm. But it wasn't your choice. Let's just be clear. It wasn't your choice, though, to be raped. No.
No, it wasn't my choice to be raped. That's true. But at the same time, I seek that situation out. I actually went with him. I didn't say no. I went to that place. I could have run. I could have, but I didn't have the guts to. Um, so to me, just tracking down all that really made me realize, okay, I was a victim of abuse, and it's never okay to go against anybody's will. But on some level, I allowed it to happen. And I think that's when the deep healing happened because I
Mm.
took ownership. I
Wow.
really took ownership
How
of
did
it.
that make you
And
feel?
I was angry. I was so angry and frustrated. And that anger I hid inside of me, and I projected it on men. I was suspicious. I thought all men would use and abuse me for the longest time, and I did attract those people over and over
Mm-hmm.
until I realized I was the creator of that, and I needed to
Wow.
heal that part of myself.
And so, fast forward, you and Robert, that was then your boyfriend, you get married on this journey through life. How does what you have attracted before you find out, how does that affect the marriage? Because it was a long marriage.
Yeah, we were together for 23 years. We were married for 17 years. Um, yeah, so I didn't want to see that part of myself. I didn't want to see I didn't want to take ownership of that I had a part of it. I wanted to blame and point fingers at him that he was the bad guy. But of course I did have a part of it. Of course I did. And when I understood that, the same way, it's like that's the freedom. The key to freedom is total ownership of every thought, action, and emotion that we project. And I attracted him into my life so that I could heal. Not only that, because we also did a lot of other beautiful things. We created lots of beautiful things together. But for my emotional healing, he was very important.
Mm.
And I think as I grew and understood and I became more empowered, I realized that I had a codependency in my relationship to him. And that's when we kind of grew apart. And I realized I needed to divorce Robert, and that we had taken our relationship as far as we could. And very grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. And how did that codependency manifest itself in the relationship, you think?
Uh, well, a lot of, for me, I was living in his shadow. I was the golf widow, that he was constantly gone. He was
The golf
always,
widow, because he
yes.
was a professional golfer.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And he still is. He's very, very much successful still. Yeah, so I felt like I was in his shadow. He was always in the limelight, and I was always, in supporting him in the background. Even though people who know me maybe would say that they didn't feel that way, but I always felt like it was his life, and I always came
Mm.
second. And at some point, I felt like, no, I have to be number one. I cannot be number two to anybody, and to myself, most importantly. I have to be number one. I have to put myself first.
Wow. Hold that thought. Let's get a break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about what breaking out of all of these shadows has meant and means to your life and other people who find themselves in the shadows. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about breaking out of those shadows that many people live in and creating and attracting for your life that the universe has for you and for all of us. Our guest this morning is Ebba Karlsson. And Ebba, one of the things that, well, the real motif for me of the story is really about overcoming and breaking through those shadows or those things that maybe hold us back. And through this journey called life, you really figured out that from the beginning of your life, even up until, 17 years in your marriage, that you were always, standing behind something or under something. And so when do you finally have the courage? Because it takes a lot of courage to break free and to say, okay, God, what is it that you want for my life? When does that happen for you?
I think it's that longing, that burning desire within yourself that you're just not happy. And that desire to go, to discover, to explore more of yourself, the longing to have peace within becomes so strong that nothing can stop you. And I think, to me, like, I always had courage to do and put myself out there. But I think my longing, I just wanted to explore more about life and understand myself better. And I never liked to feel like a victim. So when I decided to start seeing everything as a gift, every difficulty
Mm.
as the biggest gift, and really going into that emotion, what it feels like, there was always this beautiful light coming from that understanding. Um, so that's the ultimate freedom. Like, we're never victims, none of us, if we choose to see the beauty in
Mm.
the darkness.
Wow.
And that, to me, is like, if we all could just embrace that, and say yes to
Hmm.
every moment, triggering moment, like what's in here for me to learn. How can I use this situation to become more empowered and free? That's like that to me is like that's why we're here.
Choose to see the beauty in the darkness. How long did it take you to get there? How, because there were a lot of darknesses, and there are a lot of darknesses in many people's lives, all of us,
Yeah.
and we can either, from this point forward, we can choose to think differently and process it differently, or we can
Mm.
stay in the dark. How did you embrace the beauty?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's changing my perspective of darkness. Like darkness doesn't, it's not per se evil. I think that's something we're conditioned to believe, that there's evil in this planet, but we forget that we have light and dark, and we need that to have contrast. And without the contrast, we don't know what life is. We don't know what's positive if we don't have negative. So it's a way of seeing the negative or the dark as our friend, as our companion to discover life and to grow, and not get stuck in the dark thinking that's
Mm,
that thinking that's it's not the end. We
right.
always have a choice, and we can always see something beautiful and be grateful for, just even if it's the smallest thing. There's
Wow.
always something to be grateful for.
Powerful. And so, when did you
Yeah.
decide that you were going to spend the next part of your life helping others to find that beauty in those dark places and to fulfill their purposes and their potentials?
Yeah, I think that was a very important part of my journey. When I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and as my at that time, Robert, my husband, my ex-husband, started playing bad and or worse. So I was pushed out to like, what? How can I contribute? Um, and I always wanted to work with sales or with making this world a more beautiful place. So in the process, I went through something called Message to Millions. It was a program where I had a coach who really helped me see my gifts, and it was all about, I've always been helping people and sharing my story, even as a child. So I guess I realized that coaching is what I'm good at. And as I'm constantly coaching myself on a daily basis, that's just a natural way of me to share what I know. And I think if we look at what we're good at and what we find joy in, that's what we should be sharing, what we should be working with as well.
Hmm.
And trusting that we have what it takes to take us where we need to be.
Sometimes I think when people don't have those tangible gifts, like, Robert is a golfer, or you don't have something that you can point to and say, this is what I do, then sometimes we say, well, I really don't have any gifts. But you came to understand that those gifts didn't have to be tangible. You didn't have to just be able to say, okay, I'm a singer or I'm a model, that they were a lot more, in many cases, intangible.
Mm, yeah. And I think, our gifts are to be discovered, and it's just not, nothing is set in stone. We change and we transform, and it takes practice to become, good at what we're doing. So we have to work, and I think we just have to pursue what makes us joyful and happy, and trust that the right moment will present itself for success. And I mean, even look at you. I'm sure you love what you're doing, and people feel that. And for a golfer like Robert, who's been playing since he was 7 and practiced a lot, I mean, it's his passion. And when he
Hmm.
plays with passion, it shows, and it's contagious.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's our responsibility to really look for what makes us happy and to share that,
Hmm.
and finding ways how that can serve humanity is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we've got to let you go, Ebba. Tell people how they can connect with you, your coaching, and most importantly, how they can pick your book up.
Yeah, so I have this offer. I would like to offer your listeners, if they want to get my book, of course, you can order it online, Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and other platforms. But if they want to, they can send me an email, and I'll be happy to send them a signed copy of my book. They can just send it to Ebba, EBBA, at truestarcoaching.com, and I will be happy to send it to them. But otherwise, you can also download it, as I said, on Kindle, if you prefer. But I would love for your readers, if they want to follow me, they can also go to my website, www.truestarcoaching.com. And I have a newsletter, so they can sign up there. And I'm planning to do some really interesting trips. I have a trip to Egypt coming up in the fall, winter, this year. So
tell us a little bit about that. Are you taking a group, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, I'm taking a group with maximum 30 people, but I'm thinking it's probably going to be a little bit smaller. So it's all about awakening to who you are and your gifts. And it's a really transformational journey to go there and discover who you are. And it's a great opportunity to discover your gifts as well.
Wow.
Entering this ancient country.
Powerful. I tell you, the law of attraction is so critical to just life. It's critical to life, what we attract, attracting more of what we want and less of what we don't want. And you are certainly helping people to do that. Ebba, may God continue to bless the work of your hands, and may you go out into the world and do great works. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this.